Hello, I'm Kristy Duncan. I'm delighted to be here today with Mia Huntington, who I've known for a while. She's now EVP and head of Buy Now, Pay Later, as well as POS lending at Elavon, based in Toronto. Welcome, Mia.
Thanks, Kristy. Nice to be here.
It is really great chatting with you. I'm so excited because we're going to put a microscope on the world of Buy Now, Pay Later and how to develop and deliver a compelling consumer experience. So jumping into today's topic, Buy Now, Pay Later is one of the fastest growing trends in the payments industry today that's fueled by accelerated shift to digital and ease of access to compelling consumer experience, as well as consumer interest in new ways to pay. It seems to encompass new consumer paradigms of applying at the point of sale. I think also a little bit driven by technology because we can do this instantaneously where we never used to be able to have to fill out the form and send it into some office at some remote processing center and get an answer back in weeks. But now we've got these on-site, real-time, pretty much applications to do this. And with the proliferation of these options at merchants, there's still this opportunity for digitization of banking through responsible innovation. So much to talk about today, Mia. I'm really excited. So let's set the stage and talk a little bit about what you do at Elavon and your career journey.
Yeah, for sure. So I joined Elavon, back in 2005 as part of an e-commerce acquisition of a little Canadian startup called Internet Secure. And, I really kind of think of myself more as an entrepreneurial spirit, but here I am, almost 17 years later, and I'm still working for a big bank. And, I'll tell you, the hugest part of my journey that's kept me here has been the willingness for the organization to kind of keep that entrepreneurial spirit. We'd like to innovate. We like to be, in the market with some of the new things that are coming into the space. And I've always had that space within the organization to be able to make that contribution. So I'm pretty excited to be taking on this new role and Buy Now, Pay Later as a result.
A great opportunity. So let's start. You've been in the job for 6 weeks now? Can you define for our audience, what is Buy Now, Pay Later? What is it and how is it new from what we've had before?
Yeah, for sure. Really simply put, Buy Now, Pay Later is just a short-term line of credit, and it lets consumers make a purchase with, usually little or no money up front, and then they pay off the balance over a number of installments. It tends to be linked to a specific purchase rather than, a general line of credit or a revolving line of credit like a credit card. And in a nutshell, it kind of offers shoppers the ability to make a purchase and receive products right now, but paying for it in installments over time. So, you asked the question, is it new? You might be thinking, as I've just described that or defined it, haven't installments been around for years? Isn't that how credit cards are used?
Exactly.
We've had private label credit cards that can only be used at a certain retailer. So that was very specific in the past. I'd kind of say everything old is new again. In a really highly digital first experience. Now with Buy Now, Pay Later, consumers can apply for credit, get instant approval, and complete their purchase. And it's all happening during the checkout process. So the main difference really to me is consumer experience and the highly digital interaction that this credit product brings.
Awesome. Yes, I love that. Everything old is new again. That's fantastic. So as the head of BNPL and POS lending at Elavon, you're delivering these customer solutions to market and developing commercial models in one of the fastest growing areas of the organization, Elavon. What, in your opinion, Mia, is driving consumer adoption of BNPL? And what's in it for merchants?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The consumer side of it, consumers absolutely love Buy Now, Pay Later. And I think that's evidenced by the significant growth in the space. And it's really driven by that consumer demand. Consumers are seeing it as a financially responsible way to pay. And some of the more popular reasons why they're choosing it is that compelling consumer digital experience that I talked about, and it results in an instant access to credit, right? You mentioned it earlier, Kristy. I don't have to fill in a form and mail it in and wait for weeks for my response. It also gives consumers the ability to buy something without paying traditionally high credit card interest, right? I really simply understand what my installments are going to look like and what my payment terms are. A lot of consumers also say it increases their spending power. It gives them that option to buy out of budget items. And they like that ability to spread the payments over time into really predictable installments. And predictable is the key there. And then I would also say that, for any consumers that have existing access to credit, this isn't just for new credit or thin credit customers. Those consumers with existing access to credit are looking at kind of time value of money. Why wouldn't I take a 0% offer from a merchant and the ability to pay, say over 12 months, rather than having to pay my credit card bill off all at the end of the month? So, consumers are really using it across a wide range of products today, and adoption is just continuing to increase, even in some new categories that weren't seen before. And again, as much as the space was previously dominated by kind of younger shoppers, there's increasingly an older generation and user base that's expected to grow the market as well. And then from the merchant perspective, they benefit from an increase in the number of sales and the size of order, right? This is all about bringing new customers to their product or their brand. The transaction costs more for a merchant. It absolutely does cost more than a credit card transaction, but merchants are willing. Every data trend shows that their sales volume, the number of repeat customers, the overall size of each purchase is higher when it comes to offering financing options at the point of sale. So it's a pretty compelling experience for both merchant and consumers.
Yeah, hard to resist that for sure. So we've seen these new kind of fintechs like Klarna and Afterpay, and everybody seems to be getting into this new game of buy now, pay later. It seems that the banks are kind of late to the game. Do you think there's still room for banks and FIs to play in this space? And how could that change the whole game?
Yeah, I really do. And I strongly believe in this. Although the space has been dominated by fintechs, 70% of current buy now, pay later users say they'd be interested in using a bank's version of a financing product. And when I think about a bank's core competencies, they're all the things that are so critical to the buy now, pay later ecosystem, right? It really spans the entire value chain of what is buy now, pay later. Banks tend to have lending products, merchant acquiring products, card issuing products. They're all the core components to kind of the hard parts of getting into the buy now, pay later market. So I think there's still lots of room for banks, both from consumer interest and core capabilities. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of banks are interested in particular because they're seeing the levels of adoption. And this is an opportunity to protect their share in both consumer lending as well as merchant acquiring businesses, and really expand, the depth with existing customers of the number of products that the existing bank customers are consuming. So I still think there's a ton of space for banks to participate, and it's a pretty nascent industry. So there's lots of opportunity for growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really interesting to watch. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about this industry as a whole. And we've seen a little bit of consolidation in the last little while with lots of M&A activity. But valuations seem to be softening. Can you talk a little bit about what's driving that, what it's all about, and if you think that this crazy new rising interest rate environment might impact that as well?
Yeah, I mean, there were certainly some very big M&A plays early on in this space, and it attracted a lot of attention. There's still some activity. Obviously, it's not an inactive space from an M&A perspective, but valuations have certainly significantly contracted. If you think about some of the publicly traded companies that are in the space today, in some cases, they're trading at 17% of their 52-week highs, which is not good. But what's causing it, right? A lot of it has to do with some macroeconomic factors. There's rising inflation, there's higher interest rates, there's, pullback on stimulus checks that were coming during the pandemic. There's unfortunately, Russian invasion of Ukraine, and just generally there's negative market sentiment. So, that obviously is driving stock prices and some of the valuations. And then I think about, the investors themselves that were primarily interested in some of these players. There's a little bit of market uncertainty because of the cost of capital, and cost of capital is really fundamental to how buy now, pay later companies operate. And I think investors were previously kind of focused on growth. Now they're looking at what's the path to profitability, as they make these investments, what would that look like? And at the end of the day, the higher interest rates more than anything probably are the biggest impact to the buy now, pay later companies and their ability to generate a profit.
Yeah, really interesting. And will those higher interest rates also be passed on to consumers?
Precisely. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, merchants are footing most of the bill to be able to make these offers to consumers. More and more you are seeing, as we move into higher ticket sizes, longer financing options for consumer offers, those interest rates are not low either. So I think it'll be an interesting time over the next little while, just based on economic forces, to see where that leads to and how, the product kind of matures, right? I would say we're entering, maybe buy now, pay later 2.0. And what does that look like? It might be quite a bit different than what the early experiences have been with the product.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the story's not over yet. So stay tuned for further developments. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So as you drive product and consumer experience, Mia, what do you think are the winning factors for a BNPL proposition to be really successful in the market?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to some of the things we've already talked about, Kristy. If I think about it, it starts with the consumer, right? They're the ones that are going to choose this as their method of payment, and what's going to lead them potentially to shop. I think, like everything that we went through during the pandemic, some things shifted and accelerated really quickly, and this is one of those spaces. So consumers are demanding kind of easier, highly digital experiences. And so, that's kind of at the core of making sure that experience is really compelling, right? It needs to be frictionless. It needs to be very few data fields to be able to say yes to the consumer for their financing. I think also from a consumer perspective, they want value from this, right? It's not just a method of payment. They want those in-app kind of merchant marketplaces, places to shop for deals and offers. You see a lot of the buy now, pay later players are really offering that as a value proposition to the consumer, to be able to see other merchants that offer it as a payment option. And then I think we're probably going to see an evolution of, just like we probably did with the credit card products over time. People are going to demand things like rewards, membership-based programs, things that are going to help kind of drive repeat buying and affinity to either the buy now, pay later brand itself or to the merchant that offers the service. And then, on the merchant side, I think, what's key here is we have to say yes to a lot of loans, right? It has to be a great consumer experience, and they have to have the opportunity to take the loan and pay. I would equate it a bit to, when you're standing at the cash and you have an American Express card and you're not sure if the merchant accepts American Express, you may not even pull it out of your wallet if you don't see the signage, right? I think the same is probably true when we think about merchants and buy now, pay later. How do we make sure that it's a great consumer experience? How is it obvious to the consumer during the shopping process that the option is available to them? And then lastly, for the merchant, it's ease of integration, right? It has to be really seamless for them, first of all, to use the service, and second of all, for their consumers, for it to fit in the flow while they're making their purchase.
Well, it sounds like we're going towards to perhaps the West's version of these super lifestyle apps that integrate so many different things with the merchant, rewards programs and membership options and marketplaces, and lots of value that we can add to that consumer experience, and conversely on the merchant side.
Absolutely.
I love it. Wow, what a great space you're in, Mia. It sounds really, really exciting.
It is. It's really exciting. I mean, not all of the attention on this space is positive. Regulators are certainly very interested, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And they're interested in consumer protections primarily, right? Because this has been a highly unregulated space at the beginning, because it was started with fintechs. I think we'll see that change over time. Um, they're worried about things like the consumer's ability to pay, and how are you assessing that ability to pay. It's one thing to have one buy now, pay later transaction. It's another thing to go and take 10 of them, right? So what does that look like? How are we protecting consumers? Making sure that consumers understand what they're signing up for. Data is the big question. It's a big question, not just in this space, around the globe, right? How is my data being used? How are you targeting me? So I think there's a number of areas that, there's some more work to be done here. And when I reference, the 2.0 version of this, I think that will play a big factor in what comes next.
Yeah, for sure. How long do you think till we get to 2.0?
I think we're in it. When I think about even our participation or interest in this space, I think it's because, it is such a compelling consumer experience. We see the value it adds to consumer. And there's a new generation of buyer that's coming up, right? That, some of them grew up during a pandemic and just started shopping during pandemic times. And their expectation of how they pay and how they apply for credit is quite different. So I think it's here now. It'll be an interesting evolution.
Yeah, well, you're in a really fun space, Mia. I'm jealous. It's a fantastic role you've got. I want to close today's discussion with a question that I ask all of our guests on Pause for Payments, and that is about your amazing career and what career advice you would share with the rising stars in our audience.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm actually just wrapping up an internal executive leadership program for women. And, it's been really interesting learnings working within that cohort of female executives. And, one of the biggest things I would say is, take that chance. Don't hold yourself back. I think I probably did that several times throughout my career. And, it's that stat of, women will wait to have, 10 out of 10 of the job requirements, and men will apply with 6 out of 10. Be willing to be bold and take that leap, and know that, you're good enough to put your hand up, be interested in the role, and you'll learn the things that you don't already check the box off on your resume.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing this, Mia. It's been a really great and insightful discussion, and I really appreciate you joining us here for Pause for Payments today.
Thanks so much for having me, Kristy. It's been a great chat.
Yeah, I've enjoyed learning about buy now, pay later, and kind of digging a little deeper in under the covers. I also want to thank our audience today for listening as we explore the exciting world of payments with Mia and other inspirational women leaders from around the world of payments. Thanks so much, everybody.